We are getting closer to the third running of the Peppermill PokerPALOOZA. It's the 3rd through the 13th of November, and it is going to be 10 insane days of poker action here in Reno. And I want to talk a little bit about what you can expect should you decide to come up here for it. 32 total tournaments and satellites are involved in this thing, so a lot of action, and I love this. This is a new wrinkle. This is something that I know a lot of players, and I'm going to be very curious to see who takes this part down, because it really shows all-around skill. The all-around champion of the PokerPALOOZA gets $15,000, and the top 10 do win cash in that regard. So it gives incentive to those who play a lot of events and try to have the best series overall. I got a few picks I might make in terms of who I think might win that. The main event is $300,000 guaranteed. The entire tournament series, $750,000 guarantee. And I shouldn't have to say this, but apparently in the poker world, you do kind of have to say this, because there have been a lot of casinos over the years that have made these guarantees, and when they didn't hit them, they canceled the tournament. That is not happening at the Peppermill. They make it clear they do not do that. If they lose money in the tournaments, so be it. They're still going to be able to keep the lights on, I can assure you that, and they recognize that. So that's a distinction, and one that I've always appreciated about the Peppermill. So if you haven't already booked your trip, go ahead and do that. The cash game action is going to be fantastic, and obviously there's lots of tournaments to be had. November 3rd through the 13th at the Peppermill. Book your stay at Peppermill Reno. It is one of the best hotel casinos you're ever going to stay at. Pretty much anyone that's ever come to Reno will tell you that's the place to stay. You can get 20% off that stay by using promo code bendeach3. We have a link set up in the description below. Speaking of Peppermill, we are heading over there for vlog 233. I have successfully booked 7 wins in a row. So I am fighting back after a brutal August and first part of September, and let's hope that continues today.
Yeah, I'm about to fade away, cause every time I wake up I feel like it's Monday. Something's going wrong with all the chemicals up in my brain. All of a sudden I don't look at anything the same way. Gotta build up of my thoughts sitting in.
An overlook of the city of Reno to start vlog 233. I get to Peppermill at about 11 a.m. on a Thursday and record an intro that I would later decide no one needed to hear. The casino is a place where one of the key members of vlog 207 won a $4,000 pot, set of queens over pocket kings, over queens and nines on queen 9-6. I actually felt kind of bad for the guy who managed to call like 200 preflop with queen 9 and be drawing dead when he flopped top 2 pair. It just felt like if you're gonna make such a crazy play and get that flop, you should win in that rare spot. I'd buy into the game for $1,000, and it wouldn't take long for the most memorable hand of the day to take place. But before we get to that, how about just a bizarre hand? 2 limps and middle position 1 raises to 35. I call on the low jack with king jack of hearts. The cutoff calls, as do 3 others. So we have a 6-way pot, and with 210 in, the board comes out ace, ace, 6, 2 hearts, giving me the nut flush draw, and it gets checked all the way around to the cutoff, who makes a tiny $30 bet. Middle position 1 check calls. If I had it to do over again, I would take the aggressive route. But as the hand went, I did the opposite in what was a 6-way pot. So I just call, and with 300 in, the 3 of us see a turn that comes out a king. Middle position 1 checks, and my plan was to just check call the cutoff here, but instead he decides to not even bet, making it clear that he didn't have an ace. The river rolls off another 6, and now MP1 checks again. I really felt like kings were the best hand here, and I could potentially squeeze out a tiny amount of money on the river. So I just bet $30 here. Off tanks longer than I would have expected him in this spot too, and the other player decides to go out, creating a $360 pot. I show my hand, expecting it to be good, but it's not, as he shows 5-6 offsuit for trips in what was truly an odd hand. Cutoff straddles and 2 players limp early position. I have pocket 4s on the button, and rather than just over limping here, I take the aggressive route this time and make it 4x. It's a raise that only the player on the rock would fold to. So with 135 in, the board comes out 9, 10, 4, 2 diamonds, giving me bottom set. Under the gun is a player I know very well. He leads out for 35 here, and the player in middle position folds. There are certain things that I know about this lead out. I can't necessarily reveal all of them in the off chance he's going to watch this, but obviously I'm going to raise here just to build this pot up, so I make it 100. He barely thinks about this at all before making the call, and with 335 in, the turn is the 8 of diamonds. Now he leads out again, the double donk. He bets 250. Now, it's going to be hard for me to put him on a hand here that beats me. And the reason I say that is, he's going to be check raising pretty much all of his flushes here. I know him that well. And should he have flopped a bigger set than me, he's checking those to me on the flop. So what the hell could he have? Well, I've seen him limp under the gun with big pairs a lot. And while usually, yes, he does limp raise a lot of those big pairs, I've also seen him continue to slow play against me in a lot of spots with them pre-flop. So, if he's got a hand like pocket kings, king of diamonds, pocket queens, queen of diamonds, pocket jacks, jack of diamonds, he very well might take this line here, especially because I raised it pre-flop. Anyway, have you ever made a read that was both right and wrong? I know that can't be the case in all actuality, but this kind of describes what was going on here. I decide to jam all in, and he thinks about it for only about 3 seconds and calls. I knew that he thought about it long enough where he didn't have the nuts. And that ended up being accurate. Problem was, I needed him to be thinking about it for like 30 seconds and call in this spot for me to have gotten it in with the best hand. So it appears that I have failed to do that, though everything I just said about my thought process about what he had proved to be right. I had just forgotten about something. He shows queen, jack of spades for the straight. So the bad news is I'm behind, but the good news is I am not drawing dead if I can just get the board to pair, something that is traditionally proved very difficult for me to do when I need to have it done. We agree to run this thing twice in what is about a $2,000 pot, so I'm going to need you to hit that like button if you want to give me hope for a chop, and smash that like button if you want to give me any hope of winning both of these boards, which seems like a ridiculous notion. But the first one rolls off a 10. So I've already locked up half the pot. I never wasted a second considering the idea that the board could pair again here. But it does! Another 10 rolls off the deck. I have complained, as you've undoubtedly heard, for years about the difficulty of pairing the board when you need the board to pair, and I can't complain about it here, as it appears that maybe, after an abysmal run in the month of August and into September, particularly when it comes to flopping sets, I somehow end up pulling this one out and scooping the pot in a spot where I was in rough shape. I would then stay hot, raising pocket nines and flopping a set on queen 9-4, 2 diamonds. But unfortunately, fast playing the hand simply resulted in a pair of folds. This is a mid-session update. Maybe it is because I happen to wear this shirt that I'm thinking about movies. Killers of the Flower Moon comes out here this month, and I just really am having a hard time figuring out how it's going to be great when it is 3.5 hours long. I just don't think there's a long list of movies that are that long that are truly great. But maybe Scorsese will surprise me on this one. And that's the end of the update.
That I'm so inconvenient, okay. Just let me be me and I'll stay out of your way. I can see the way you look at me, I'm such a disgrace. I never really asked to be brought into this place. You wanna love me? Well then baby I have a taste. All the highs and the lows, no you'll never be the same. I don't really wanna hurt you but I can't control the pain. If you're sticking by my side, maybe we could be okay. Okay.
I didn't flop the nut flush draw on a paired board against a tough opponent. And when I bricked the turn, he made the exact $200 wager I thought he'd make after raising pre-flop, and I opted to just give it up, thinking that he's not going to pay me off should I get there anyway. and everything I'd seen about his game would indicate that. Here's another question, and apparently I'm asking them today on this vlog. Have you ever called a raise strictly because you were on the button and found yourself regretting it? Don't answer that question, because I know that if you're watching this vlog, the answer will have been yes at some point. LoJack has the rock, and the cutoff makes it 35. I have King 9 of hearts on the button, and make the call with the rock completing. So with 110 in, the board comes out 9, deuce 4, rainbow, 1 heart. Cutoff bets 50, and I make the call with the straddle going out. So with 210 in, the turn is an offsuit 7. He bets 100 here, and this is definitely a close spot in my opinion, because I certainly felt he could be value betting worse some percentage of the time. I definitely was close to folding, but after some thought, I decided to see the river. That card comes a 10, and now he checks. This is too thin even for me. I check it back and lose to his ace 9. So far, there is not a single hand on this vlog that I would be putting on some sort of a highlight reel if I were trying to showcase my poker skill. All right, so as you probably know, our boy Bugsy is halfway across the world in Spain.
Having the time of his life.
Barcelona.
Yes.
So what is your ideal international vacation? Where would you go? Where is next on your bucket list places to go?
Certainly, it would be Cyprus. I have family there, and so I'd love to reconnect with them and reconnect with my own heritage.
And what will you do in Cyprus besides that?
That's for me to know and you guys to dream about.
I look up on the TV to see Niner Cowboy talk. Gotta love that rivalry. And Christian McCaffrey at 20-1 for MVP? I doubt he'll win, but he's clearly been the MVP of the league through 4 weeks. I'd lose a few more small pots and I'd witness a couple more all-ins before getting into a $450 pot against a short stack who actually flopped a straight. Problem for him was that he slow played it, which in turn allowed me to make a bigger straight, and that pot got shipped over to me. I would 3-bet aces and get called by the grinder on my right. That was the good news. The bad news was I'd flop a set of aces. 95% of the time, that is the last thing you want to do with your pocket aces, as you'll generally always get more action with just your overpair, and the set often causes you to lose big pots against hands that beat it. Anyway, in this hand, all I did was kill my action against probably 10s or jacks, but I didn't actually get a look. So I was already running good, and then it got even better, as a viewer of the vlog named Gene hooked me up with not just a Golden Knights fleece vest, but a championship puck as well. You gotta love it. I'd also talked to a viewer of the vlog who jumped into the game named Jevin, who seemed like a cool guy. We've had a lot more viewers showing up of late, and it's been cool to see. And I'm certainly expecting even more for the Peppermill Poker Palooza. So this Thursday was the rare day where I got to play the entirety of my session with a winning image. And although I didn't have many big hands to work with, that definitely was a great feeling. Problem was, over the last several hours of play, the few times I did make a big hand, I didn't get action on them, due in large part, I have no doubt, because of that image. And if I can just mention football for the second time on this vlog, it is kind of interesting how it tends to work when you're either on a big upswing or a big downswing. I feel like over the course of those 9 consecutive losing sessions that I had back in August, I was rarely ever playing from ahead. I was stuck all the time. And you see that in football. Teams that just get the lead and hang on to it do way better than teams that are trying to win it in the fourth quarter. And on this day, I basically had the lead after 4 minutes of play were gone in the first quarter. So that was a nice feeling, even if I didn't get too many playable hands throughout the entirety of a 6-hour session before racking up and booking the win. Wrapping up the session, booking a win of $1,166. It's kind of funny. It's like you do everything enough, eventually everything is going to happen to you. Feel very confident in saying I've never run it twice while behind having to have the board pair in vlog history and have it pair on both boards. Feel Feel pretty confident that's never happened until today. So, considering how I ran with sets over the course of August and into September, glad to see that it's flipping around a little bit. That's now 8 wins in a row, and we are more than halfway back in terms of how things ran for me with a brutal downswing. All right, so that section of the vlog that you just saw was shot on a Thursday. I generally shoot all the vlogs on a Thursday because I want to be able to begin the editing process on a Friday, get the editing done over the weekend, and then get the vlogs up on Monday. I've always kind of prided myself in the turnaround time, and that's usually the reason for that. But obviously, it stands to reason that oftentimes the games are at their best on Fridays, and that was the case this week. Probably one of the all-time great games that I've been in recent memory. The double Ds were nowhere to be found. You had a number of guys who give a lot of action in this game, and it was just truly remarkable. And how about this hand? It's going to go down as one of the most memorable hands that I've ever played that fall into a very unique category. And you'll see what that category is. It comes when a man that you've seen on this vlog before, a guy who is a slightly better soccer player than me, his name's Brian, formerly of DC United, limps in under the gun +1. MP1 makes the call, and the hijack is in the rock. I have pocket aces in the cutoff, and I raise to 45 here, and probably to nobody's surprise, all of these players decide to call me. So with 185 in the pot, the board comes out 9-7-6, 2 hearts, and it gets checked over to the hijack. He is a very aggressive player, but he also knows that I know that he's an aggressive player. So I was kind of taken aback when he led out for double the pot on 9-7-6. He bets 400 into just under 2. And I will say, if this was heads up, I'm probably not folding. But given the fact that there are 4 players in this pot, it just really screamed strength to me. And of course, I've still got to worry about these other 2 guys. Guys who could easily have smashed this particular board. So, I'm just go out right now with the aces. And when talking about what I just mentioned, this hand will be the most memorable hand I ever played when you're looking at hands that I only put in money pre-flop on. So it's back on Brian, who's got more than 2,000 in front of him, and he jams all in, which I certainly thought was going to result in a snap fold for the player on his immediate left, and either a snap fold or a snap call from the original bettor. Turns out neither one of those 2 things would ever occur. The player on his left thinks for a long time and calls off his whole stack. Then it's back on the hijack, who let out into this flop for 400, and he then has to think about it. And after he gives it some thought as well, he calls off his entire stack as well. So this is just an absolutely insane situation. $7,500 in this pot. Brian has the nut straight. Player on his left has a pair and the nut flush draw. And the hijack, 2 pair. And as you can see, the straight simply holds up, as it will do the majority of the time. And much like his DC United did when they beat Kansas City in the MLS Cup in 2004, Brian was victorious in this situation. He had so many chips in front of him at this point, he had to call Mike Nelson over to bring him racks and cash him into hockey pucks. It was truly an insane pot. One of those where you find yourself thinking about it, it's like, man, I've been playing poker since 2008, and I have been in a grand total of 0 spots that good in my life. Not one, but congratulations to him for managing to do it. And I somehow just escaped danger with pocket aces in this spot. I'm not suggesting it was a particularly difficult spot, but saving that 400 on the initial bet, I think was pretty difficult given the players in question. So that'll do it for this one. I hope you enjoyed it. If so, hit those like and subscribe buttons, as it helps out the channel a lot, and I genuinely appreciate it. Also, follow along on Instagram at bendeach. We'll see you back here next time.
Yeah, I'm about to fade away, cause every time I wake up I feel like it's Monday. Something's going wrong with all the chemicals up in my brain. All of a sudden I don't look at anything the same way. Gotta build up of my thoughts sitting in an ashtray. I'm sorry that I'm so inconvenient, okay. Just let me be me and I'll stay out of your way. I can see the way you look at me, I'm such a disgrace. I never really asked to be brought into this place. You wanna love me? Well then baby I have a taste. All the highs and the lows, no you'll never be the same. I don't really wanna hurt you but I can't control the pain. If you're sticking by